with that, here is part 2 of Straight from the Training Ground, College Recruiting.
It's a really good interview I think we have here, and he really kind of unveils a lot of the things that they're looking for at that level, and some of the incentives to go and play at that level. And so it's really great that we were able to get this.
Yeah, and I just real quick before we bring in the interview, I'd just like to say I think that both coaches we interviewed, Roz, bring up some good points about the commitment level that's required too. Each level, I think they alluded to kind of the commitment level throughout the entire year when you get to college, what that's like, and there are some differences. And again, there's positives and negatives to both. It just comes back to what you always say: what's the best fit for you, and what do you want out of the whole experience?
Yeah, absolutely. He goes into this in the Division III discussion. It just really is fascinating, and I hope that players and parents that are trying to help their players get placed to have a look and pick up some of these tips. We're really pleased to have as our guest here is an old friend of mine, but also he's a Division II soccer coach at West Liberty University, Mr. Sean Regan. Sean, I'm glad you could join us here tonight. I think what we're trying to look for from you tonight is just some insights into the recruiting process, as well as some information about where you are with your program and the process and the time frame in terms of your recruiting cycles and things like that.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, we're kind of right in the thick of it. Actually tomorrow is National Signing Day across the board for Division I and Division II. And so basically what that means is that we can officially send out scholarship offers for the players to sign. And basically when we send them out tomorrow, they have 7 days to make their decision, and once they sign those, they're basically fully locked into our university for a year, and we really only send those out to the guys that we know that are pretty much 100% committed going forward, and then basically kind of all schools have their own different timelines. Obviously the women's game moves extremely fast compared to the guys' game into the recruiting aspect, where on the girls' side, we have freshmen in high school and sophomores that are committing to colleges already verbally. Where on the guys' side, it is a little bit slower. So kind of where we are right now is probably have about 50% of our recruiting will be completed within the next 2 weeks. And then we'll probably go into mid-January to early February to where our class will be complete from a signing standpoint. Kind of the recruiting trail for us hits hard now that the college season for us has been over. After last week, we lost in the conference tournament. So the next couple of weeks, we're hitting up college showcases everywhere from Washington, D.C. to Indianapolis to Orlando, Florida. And then a lot of us will be doing a lot of international recruiting over the Christmas times. There's showcases, pretty much all over Europe right now. So our sole focus right now is completing our class for next year. And then really around Christmas time is when we start turning our attention to the junior class going forward.
Okay, so that's the timeline. So you're trying to take care of your 2023s and getting that nailed down. And then, okay, understandable. Jay, do you want your question?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on the fact where you said, Sean, about signing day. I'm glad you brought that up. And just based on your experiences and the time that you've been around the college game, what would you say is on average? You said you obviously are going to send those out to people you think are 100%, but what would you say on average is a pretty solid percentage you'd expect to get back? I mean, is it all 100%? Is there usually, 80% that end up signing?
Yeah, the ones that we send out you're probably about 100%. Because they've already verbally committed to you. There might be maybe one or two surprises over the years, but that can really only come as if maybe somebody highballed a scholarship without you knowing at the last minute, because they needed to get that player in. So that does happen. But most of us, because they have a 7-day window, just kind of wait, and they might have received 2 or 3 offers, but it's pretty much to do all the paperwork and the legwork and all that stuff like that. We're pretty fairly confident that when we send out that offer that they're going to sign it.
Okay. Yeah.
Interesting.
I have a second question. I'll send it back to you, Roz. How has recruiting changed over the last few years? Or has it changed, with social media and all these different things?
It is, it really changed over COVID. to be honest with you. With the lack of tournaments and lack of games, students got really savvy on the social media side of things, with everything from, Twitter and Facebook and TikTok and Instagram to creating huddle accounts and with the VO and Trace and all that stuff like that they now have a full package of games and training sessions and clips that they send you, and that's basically, it's pretty vital that we get that information because, a lot of our schools don't have the massive budgets to travel across the country, so we have to be very selective in the tournaments that we go to. So kind of the initial contact that we get with a lot of players is sending out their highlight film and their games. And then once we gauge their interest, we kind of send them the information that we're going to be at these 4 or 5 tournaments. And if they're in that area, we can go and take a look at them. But at the same time, as if we can't make the tournaments that they're in, we invite them at the Division 2 level. They can come and they can train with the team. We're the only NCAA division that can do that. So it's a trial per se. So that makes it a little bit easier because we can actually gauge them against our current players.
Right.
I'm still very old school. I like to see the players at least 2 or 3 times. I like to see them play against our guys because I do think that, the video can be misleading at times. At times you don't know the level they're playing at, especially when it comes to international students. Unless you're comfortable and familiar with the country that they play in, it's a bit of a risk. You know what I mean? So I think that, obviously the majority of us are still like to go to, the tournaments and see those in person because we can get a little bit more from them. We can see how they react when they get subbed. We can see their behavior on the bench. We can see if their parents are a nightmare on the sidelines. We can see how they interact. And all that stuff is important, because they're not just playing, soccer or football for us. They're students, and they're going to be with us for 4 years, and we take care of them. We look after them like they're our sons or our little brothers, and all that stuff's very important. I think you can only get that from really the face-to-face interaction.
So here's a question for you in terms of the makeup of your class per year. We all hear stories about NAIA being, full of internationals, but NCAA Division 2 is very similar too. There's a lot of internationals there, and we know, I think everybody knows, you have to do that in a way to compete with some of the programs, particularly in your conference.
Yep.
NBC, one of the toughest conferences in the country. But what is your general makeup in terms of percentages? In terms of your recruiting class, is it 50% internationals, 50% domestic? Is it 25, 75? What is it typically?
Yeah, I mean, I think it fluctuates year to year. But certainly as a whole, across the NCAA Division 2 board, I would say we're close to 70% international. It's very high. And in our conference, I would say we might be above that mark. On the domestic side of things, we try to get the best domestic players that we can. Unfortunately, there are some differences. A lot of clubs still push these kids to Division 1 when they're not Division 1 level. And then when they don't get those offers, they almost look down. But an international student is just happy to come over here. So it's actually tremendously easier to recruit internationals compared to an American. And if we are looking at a good American kid, they almost want double the scholarship that some of the internationals want because, they've been told Division 1, Division 1, Division 1, and their parents have been paying the clubs, 8, 9, 10 grand a year. And a lot of Division 2 schools, our scholarships aren't that high, so a lot of our kids are between $2,000 to $10,000, you know what I mean? And if we're only offering them $2,000 to come to university, they would rather go to a bigger school and not even play. So I think that has a big, factor into it. But, being a state university like us, I still believe in the American product, and we try to make sure that, at least half of our class is American as best we can. We've probably within the past 2 years, we were about 60-40 American, but I think after last year, I think we're now around the 50-50 mark.
Yeah. Interesting. Jake?
Nice. That's a great point. One last question for me, real quick, Sean. Do you have any advice, just real quick, 1 or 2 things for any parents, high school players currently that are out there right now as a college coach for the whole recruiting process in itself right now?
Yeah, it's it's start around, also on the guy side, it's the beginning of their junior year, and that's the biggest thing is to kind of make yourself marketable, because we're stretched thin, with most of us only being head coaches and having GAs. We can only be somewhere as much as we can, and especially during the fall when we're playing our matches, it's very rarely that we're able to get out and see students play unless they're kind of within an hour radius. Going to showcases, getting yourself seen, writing to all the coaches, your dream list, your backup schools, schools you may have never heard of. You have to put yourself out there. And that's the most important thing. That we're not going to find you as much as you'll find us. And it's being realistic in your goals. That's a big thing. We all wanted to play for Notre Dame and Georgetown and all that stuff like that. But, at the end of the day, they're only taking 5 or 6 guys per class from around the world. So we're not going to make that. So I think it's just kind of going and observing universities in your area, going to watch 1 or 2 Division I, 2 schools, Division II, Division III, NEI, JUCO, and knowing the level of the actual university. Because there's a lot of Division III teams that can spank Division I teams. Man, it's the truth.
Yeah.
We get caught up on this level a lot of times, and there's a school that somebody can play at every level. I mean, you can play Division I if you want to, because there's schools that you can. But even just like in ours, we have 3 teams in the top 25 in our conference, and they could easily batter a lot of the Division I schools in our area. So they're better than the Division I, so they can do that. But it's just getting your list down and it's making sure that you're comfortable with the school from an academic standpoint. You're comfortable with the soccer program. It's an environment that is welcoming, somewhere where you want to be for 4 years. And we always say, it's like, God forbid, if something happens to you and you break your leg and you can never play soccer again, is this somewhere where I want to call home? I mean? And that's the most important thing. And it's visiting schools multiple times, whether it be an official visit, an unofficial visit, going and sitting the classes with the guys, understanding what you might be majoring in, training with the guys, getting a sense of things, and then doing the old school checklist, getting your top 5 schools and what do they have, what they don't have, and kind of going over it from there.
I think it's a great point about knowing what's out there and understand it, because me and Jason and I always kind of joke, if you could take a U12 parent with all these ambitions and expectations and fast forward 6 years for them, and they might change their opinions on a few things in terms of which schools they want to go for and what's within reason, what's a reasonable destination for their player. So it is interesting you say that.
Yeah, and each level has their own strengths and weaknesses. I mean, if you're looking at the Division I level, you're an 80% athlete to a 20% student. I mean, you're going to be gone sometimes Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and and coming back and just being in class basically Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And that's tough. Where Division II, you're probably more 50-50. Because we have a pretty intense spring season like Division I, but our travel's not as intense in terms of flying, going far away. And then at the Division III level, it's more 80%. Student to athlete. You get a good fall season. All your games are pretty local, but in the springtime, you only get 15 sessions in one match. So it's very, very light on that side of things. So that might gear towards more of the, intellectual student that still enjoys a really competitive, soccer.
Yeah. So last thing for me, Sean, 2 minutes. I know you had a really competitive season in terms of the conference level this year. It was really, really strong. Can you summarize your season, how you guys did at West Liberty University in terms of your program?
Yeah, so I mean, we're still a young program. It's only the 5th year of existence for men's soccer. So this senior class is kind of the founders of the program. So we're still very, very young in kind of the program. So we made the playoffs for the first time in history. So that was a good step. But we do probably play in arguably the top conference in Division II. We had at one point Charleston and D&E were number 1 in the country. They flip-flopped for a couple of weeks, and then Notre Dame just got into the national tournament today, and they flirted in the top 25 here. So you're playing against teams that are just fantastic. So and then everybody else around us is very, very good. There's no
and usually a conference maybe has maybe one out of 2 conferences as a team in the top 25. You've got 3.
We got 3, yeah. So there was only one other. Florida conference got 3 as well. So it's that intense. So Yeah, the conference champion, the runner-up, and the team that finished second in the league all got in, and they all got high seats. Charleston's number 2, D&E's number 4, and Notre Dame's number 7. Yeah, so it's wild, but it's good. It's a great level that guys can play against, and they can see that the competitive level between the top teams is tremendous. That the level that we play against Wheeling and Wesleyan is good, and there's just no easy games. There's no guaranteed wins, which I think is both good and bad, because I'd like to walk away with 4 guaranteed wins, but versus guaranteed losses. But I think it only makes you stronger, and that's where a lot of our schools shine when we play teams outside of our conferences. We almost have 100% win record over the past 2 years outside of our conference. So, like even last year for us, we beat Mercyhurst, and they were number 2 in the country this year. So it just kind of shows you the kind of different levels that are out there, and the competitiveness across the board is just unreal.
Yeah, fantastic.
Well, Sean, we appreciate you taking the time to join us tonight. We appreciate all your insight and on the recruiting process, and congrats on everything you're doing there with your program. Keep up the great work.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Sean.
Visit our friends at Football Town for casual football wear.
Visit our partners at TractionSocks.com for performance grip socks created for all athletes. Use the discount code TractionSocks22 right now for savings.